Thank you. So now we've got some technical issues out of the way here. Good afternoon. I'm Ken Nolan from Burlington Electric in Vermont. For those who don't know, Burlington is located in northern New England, about halfway between Boston and Montreal. I work power resources for the municipal utility there. We are a subdivision of the city, so we actually operate the utility, but we report to the mayor. Just to put some context here, Burlington is Vermont's largest city. When I say largest, we're 40,000 people. The state as a whole is about 600,000 people, so pretty small scale. We've been talking for the last day and a half, really at a national and global level, and I'm going to bring you down to very concrete, specific application of the concept we've been talking about. We happen to be home to the state university and the largest hospital in the region, but even then we have 20,000 electric customers, about 350,000 megawatt hours we serve a year, 65 megawatt peak. So think about a tenth of Vancouver or smaller. The one advantage we really have is the population in Burlington is very active, very progressive, and they're engaged on energy issues pretty substantially. We have a very active community outreach. We have neighborhood assemblies that are constantly talking about energy issues. Last fall, and the reason I was asked to come here, last September we bought a 7 megawatt hydro plant, which resulted in us reaching the point of being 100% sourced by renewable energy for our electric supply. So I want to tell you a little bit about the story. This is the innovative finance panel, but in all honesty, when I started trying to detail what we did innovative, we don't think of what we did as very innovative on the financing front. We use very traditional techniques. For a utility, we issued municipal bonds to procure some of our resources. We actually own a 50 megawatt biomass plant. We own the hydro plant I mentioned. And those bonds were issued with greater than 80% public support. We have to have a vote anytime we issue debt, and the residents of the community came out and supported every decision we've asked them to make. We also were able to leverage some of the bond reserve funds. So we built a biomass plant in the 1980s. Those bonds recently got paid off, and there's about $10 million of reserve funds that were attached to that got freed up. We actually used those funds to buy the hydro plant. So we were able to roll some of that investment we made in the past forward. We also used pretty liberally power purchase agreements. So leveraging public-private partnerships, using the tax incentives that private developers can get, with our being willing to back the financing through a contract. And we did that through varying 5, 20, 25-year contracts, whatever the developers really needed to make the projects work. Most of those were for fixed price, so the developer knew they were going to get a certain dollar per megawatt hour. We knew we were going to spend a certain level of money on the energy we were buying. Vermont also is very aggressive on net metering legislation. We have incentive tariffs. I was talking to someone last night. We end up having to pay through state legislation 20 cents a kilowatt hour for every kilowatt hour a solar project generates. To put that in context, Vermont's retail rates are roughly about 15 cents a kilowatt hour on average. So we're paying an additional 5 cents above what we're getting for revenues for anyone who puts on a solar panel on their house or business. It's really spurred the development in the state and in the city in particular. If I had to point to one thing that I would consider innovative in the way we did this, I talked about commodities markets, which is not something a municipal utility or a municipality typically deals with. But in New England, we have very robust renewable portfolio standards in pretty much every state. Vermont's the last holdout. We don't have a standard in Vermont. They're actually voting on it today in our legislature to make us the 6th state to have that legislation. But because we were investing, signing contracts or owning renewable projects, we were able to sell credits from that into the other markets in the other states. We actually used that to buy down the cost of the renewability. So we have a very active commodities group in a small municipal utility that is using the financial markets to keep the cost low for our residents. So when I look at it, the real change that came about to drive Burlington to this green future was a few changes in perspective. It wasn't anything on the financing side we did different. We realized early on, about 20 years ago, that efficiency is a supply resource. If we can make people use less for less cost than going out and buying the energy from a generating plant, that's a good thing for us. We built momentum with small victories. We bought small contracts, we signed small contracts, so that from the city leadership perspective, they were never making a decision on a huge investment. It was all small investments and one step after another to get behind. We leveraged the tax incentive that private developers brought. We often found it was cheaper for us to let them take the tax incentives than it was to issue municipal debt, which in the US is tax exempt. And it was still cheaper to use the private industry to do that. And we looked at the true cost of various fuel types, both from an intermittent and from a risk standpoint. When you're buying natural gas or coal, here last night we heard that natural gas is very cheap in Vancouver. We had to treat gas too until Storm Katrina hit New Orleans. And now all of a sudden we had prices that went up 20 and 30 times. So we started looking at our investments from a risk perspective. We were managing the risk, not the cost, and looking over the full 25 years life that we expected these contracts to have. And you get different answers when you start to look that way. Things that look like they're too expensive now actually start to make sense when you're looking at what the worst case risk if things really become troublesome turns out to be. I'm going to end with just a couple of slides here that show the impact we've had. So on energy efficiency, that's our first choice. We have 6 people in our utility that are dedicated to nothing other than helping residents and businesses become more efficient. We fund that through an adder onto our electric rates. And we use less energy today than we did in 1989 as a city, even though our economy has grown about 30%. And from a renewable standpoint, I'm here to tell you renewables can actually reduce your costs. The blue line in the chart is what our actual gross power costs are. The green line is our net cost after we deal with the financial markets and the renewable energy credits. What I'm trying to show you here is our actual cost of electricity from a wholesale standpoint has dropped 40% since 2009. Well, we went to 100% renewability. And we're now using that $10 million a year to reinvest into solar and battery storage and greater efficiency and trying to drive the curve even further. Thank you.